Welcome to Perverted Justice. This is not just a story. It's a call to action for integrity and radical honesty, in spite of personal cost. Now here's your host, Shielagh Clark.
Hello again, this is episode 9. I had a lot of new listeners show up for episode 8. And I'm sure that some were genuinely interested in hearing truth, but I'm also sure that some of them were not. So before we get into this next episode, I just want to say something. If you found yourself feeling angry at me or angry at Mike or Cynthia while you listened, if you called any of us liars in your discussions after you listened, if you simply refuse to believe a corroborated report because you don't like it, congratulations. You are the reason that children are not safe. You are the reason that by the time a child abuser is incarcerated, they have amassed an average of 100 victims. Everyone is against abuse, enabling, and cover-up, right up to the point where their friends are implicated or something they hold dear is at risk. And then, like clockwork, the victims or whistleblowers are the liars. And don't misquote me. I'm not claiming Pete is a sexual abuser. But what you're doing now by labeling me a liar again, because you think you know Pete Nargi and he would never, is the exact same thing that happened with Weaver in 1992, in 1998, in 2005, and all of the time in between, and still to this day if you refer to his friends. It is the same logic Pete used to defend his inaction. I knew him, and I didn't think he would sexually abuse a child. To quote him, I didn't think he was that type of person. I refuse to believe what is right in front of my face because it is inconsistent with what I want to be true about the person I think I know, or it would cost me too much to go there. Anyway, I listened to a TED Talk by Brené Brown in 2021, I think. I'm not sure when she gave it, but that's when I listened to it. Listen.
And it wasn't until a man looked at me one day after a book signing and said, I love what you have to say about shame. I'm curious why you didn't mention men. And I said, I don't study men. And he said, that's convenient. And I said, why? And he said, because you say to reach out, tell our story, be vulnerable. But you see those books you just signed for my wife and my 3 daughters? I said, yeah. They'd rather me die on top of my white horse than watch me fall down. When we reach out and be vulnerable, we get the shit beat out of us. And don't tell me it's from the guys and the coaches and the dads, because the women in my life are harder on me than anyone else.
Can you imagine being called out for a failure, knowing what's being said about you is true, and then watching your family react by lashing out in anger, boldly saying that you are too good of a person to have done those things? How isolating and crushing would that experience be for you? How heavy is the burden of having to pretend to be perfect, of being left no room to be human, no room to err and be offered forgiveness? Do we really love people we do that to? Or are we actually selfishly loving ourselves and our tidy perceptions, while simultaneously locking others in prisons of fear? Fear that they'll lose everything if they tell the truth. Anyway, that's enough of that. I'm moving on. So, the last time I skipped over communication with my attorney about this issue because It kind of leads me directly into this episode's content, and I didn't want to be confusing. Before I called the advocate, I had a conversation with my attorney about wanting to clarify this bit about Pete Nargi. And she told me that the time for clarification is depositions, if we make it that far. She explained that the next step was for the church to file its answer with the court, and then we would go from there. She did predict that they would likely deny everything, because that's just kind of the way that this process works. Burden of proof is on me. Then she said maybe they would offer to settle. And she said something basically along the lines of, maybe that's X amount of dollars for you to go away. She told me to get a therapist and to let her do her job. So that conversation threw up all kinds of red flags for me. I didn't want dollars in exchange for silence. I wanted resolution. I wanted the truth. I didn't want money, and I definitely was not going to take money in exchange for my voice. So when I hung up, I pulled out my retainer agreement, and to my dismay, I saw that it included language that gave her power related to settlement agreements, and no clear indication if she would fight to avoid a non-disclosure agreement when the settlement time came around. So I'm not claiming that she would have settled without my permission. I don't have any idea, but the language seemed to allow it, seemed to allow her to have deciding power on things that I was concerned she would not hold the same position as me on, given her apparent lack of concern about being clear about things that were said. I didn't know how far that was going to extend, what issues it would touch, and I felt dismissed and powerless in this situation. So I asked by email if we could rework the agreement in order to eliminate some of the language that was making me feel uncomfortable. And she said something like that would mean that she has to contact me every 10 minutes to run everything by me so that she could litigate my case. And I mean, I understand that if we eliminate the entire power of attorney, that would be the case. But she just really wasn't receptive to my concerns at all. And so I'd been following Boz Chivijan on Twitter for a while. He was the reason that I knew to be concerned about the NDA at all. But I had been unaware that he could take cases outside of Florida. If I had known that, I probably would have chosen him to begin with. Started out there. And just to be clear, this is not an endorsement for Boz. Anyway, he's Billy Graham's grandson. He puts himself forward as a trauma-informed expert on church abuse cases. He claims to put victims in the driver's seat. That's his slogan, to give back power to the victim while holding institutions accountable. He had worked as a prosecutor for child abuse in Florida, and that opened his eyes to the reality of abuse in churches. He's the one who founded Grace with some other friends in 2004 to help churches respond to abuse. And he's not part of that organization anymore, but this is definitely his wheelhouse, and he is looked to as kind of the expert in this space. So I reached out to him because, given his close association with the church, being Billy Graham's grandson and whatever, I thought that I would have a better shot at redemption in this process, some other non-monetary solution to this issue than it seemed like I would have with my original run-of-the-mill personal injury attorney. And Boz reviewed my case and teamed up with an attorney who's licensed to practice in New York, and they agreed to take my case together. So the day before my dad died, I was actually driving to his house to take my shift sitting with him when the original attorney, she called me to yell at me about not trusting her and her firm. And I remember she said, if you don't trust us, then maybe we're not the firm for you. And I had already been speaking to Boz, and I was going to leave anyway. I had to pull over to listen to her because I was crying too much to drive. I had such a difficult time sticking up for myself in the early days of this litigation. I was just so afraid of being annoying or being a burden. I was afraid that I had way too many questions. I was scared about the whole process. It was just this big, unknown, uncharted territory, both civilly and criminally. And I was afraid of being completely misrepresented. I desperately wanted people to understand who I am and where I was coming from. And then at the same time, the whole thing just felt so selfish. Like I was being so selfish to think that anyone should prioritize me or risk losing anything to make something right by me. It was just this weird conflict between what I knew to be right and what I felt I was worthy of. I guess it was brutal, and I cried all the time. So I switched attorneys in early September as a way of just trying to maintain my integrity in this process. And then the church answered the complaint. I had still been holding out hope that they would defy the odds and do this right. But I was also bracing myself for them to answer and deny everything like the first attorney had warned me might happen. But honestly, nothing could have prepared me for what they actually did. The answer is a little bit annoying to read. I'll link it and the complaint again, because in order to read the answer, you have to have the complaint and the answer side by side. So you have to refer to the complaint to know what each admission or denial is referring to, because it doesn't repeat any of it. So if you go to line 13 in my complaint, it reads, upon information and belief, at all times relevant, the church provided an office for the senior pastor on the premises. Okay? Refer to line 13 in the answer, and it reads, defendant denies knowledge or information sufficient to form a belief as to the truth of the allegations set forth in paragraph 13 of this verified complaint. Line 16. At all times relevant hereto, Weaver was employed as senior pastor at the premises by defendant, the church. Go to the answer on line 16. Defendant denies each and every allegation set forth in paragraph 16 of the verified complaint. Line 18. At all times relevant hereto, Weaver had an office on the premises. Go to the answer, line 18. Defendant denies each and every allegation set forth. And just for clarity, it says paragraph, but when I read to you, at all times relevant hereto, Weaver had an office on the premises, that's the entirety of the paragraph. It's one line, one sentence. I'm not leaving anything out that would explain this answer. The church answered and denied basic statements of fact that they know to be true. There are men sitting on the board at Hyde Park Baptist Church who absolutely know, without a doubt, that Jonathan Weaver was employed by Hyde Park Baptist Church and that he had an office on the premises. I sat with my complaint for hours, meticulously combing through the words to try to be sure it was all correct. And they're going to straight up lie in their answer? They denied all the abuse, and not with the same language about forming a belief as to the truth, but straight up denial. And I understand That's how these things go. Burden of proof is on me. I still think it's wrong, but that's not the point. If they hadn't stepped up to make things right before now, why would they start with admitting liability? But at the end of the answer, where they list their defenses, their attorney claimed 12 affirmative defenses. Some of them are admittedly difficult to understand, like the equitable doctrine of latches. Nobody knows what that is if they're not an attorney. Okay? It's attorney jargon, legal language. But there is one that stood out from the rest. It just popped right off the page. Their fifth defense, line 106. Plaintiff's claims are barred by the equitable doctrine of unclean hands. Quick Google search says this. The unclean hands doctrine is an equitable defense that prevents a party from seeking relief in court if they have engaged in wrongful or inequitable conduct related to the subject matter of their claim. It is based on the principle that he who comes into equity must come with clean hands. I could accept the denial of things that they didn't witness, but I could never have expected them to blame me for being abused. I don't care that they aren't attorneys. Allowing that to be filed with the court as a defense was egregious. If my attorney had tried to argue something completely out in left field, I would have called her on it. In fact, in my second complaint, when I sued them a second time under the Adult Survivors Act, my attorney did include something that she admitted was to make them look bad, and I challenged her on it, and she removed it before we filed. There is an important distinction that needs to be made here. My complaint was verified, meaning I approved it. Their answer was not verified. Their attorney signed it, stating, "The foregoing answer is true to his own knowledge, except as matters therein stated on information and belief, and to those matters he believes to be true, the grounds of his belief as to all matters not stated upon his knowledge are correspondence and other writings furnished to him by defendant and interviews with defendant." I have no idea if the church reviewed this answer before it was filed. But here is Alex Valentine in 2022 claiming he spoke with their attorney every week for 2 years.
What we've told our attorney, and I'll tell you quite frankly, because I've spoken to him once a week for the past 2 years.
That's way more contact than I ever had with mine. Regardless, it was their duty to know. This idea that the church was powerless in this whole process is asinine. These are grown men in leadership positions trying to excuse their behavior by claiming powerlessness. How is that not a bid for dismissal, for lack of capacity to perform the duties of their positions? Any one of them would claim on any given day that they're qualified to lead. Here is board member Alan Bradford on that topic.
Basically, women, according to the Bible, should not be leading men. They shouldn't be leading.
They shouldn't be leading men in certainly in the home, certainly in the church. Business is a little different situation. I'll talk about that some more later. And in government, women have this desire to be in control. I mean, everybody does, actually. We all kind of want to control things in our lives. We want to avoid things that we don't like, and we want to go towards things that we enjoy. And we're always kind of like fighting with people in our lives for control over what's going on. God wants men to do this. He does not want women to do this. He wants men to control things. He does not want women to control things. And he anoints men to control things. And he does it simply because men were created first. It's an arbitrary decision on God's part. He didn't say, oh, women are inferior, or there's something wrong with them, or they can't do it. He just said, I created man first, so therefore he's the one that... Men screwed everything up, didn't they? And the answer is, yeah, we did, actually. So they say, well, you guys screwed everything up. Maybe it's time for us to take over. Maybe we can do things better, I think. So maybe we should be dominant. We should be running things. And you guys should be, playthings, I guess, like you used to view us. And the problem with this, of course, is that women have the capacity to sin and be selfish just as much as men do. What they miss, what they don't have, is the anointing from God. Without that anointing, everything's going to go to pot. It doesn't matter how smart they are, or how wise they are, or what techniques they use, what kind of governments that they pursue. It will all go down because God is not with them. And let's just talk about business for a second. I worked for corporations for most of my life, for almost 40 years. And I worked for men, and I worked for women. And generally, there wasn't a whole lot of difference between the way the women ran things and the men ran things. But it was because they were trained by men. The corporate way of doing things was male-dominated. When women take over, women are going to do things their way. They're not going to do things our way, because our way in their minds didn't work. So they're going to do things their way. They're going to do them differently. And because they're not anointed by God, because those ways are not anointed by God, and because those ways are not the ways that God does things, it'll fail.
But they're dropping the ball at every turn. Anyway, this completely threw me. I could not believe it. And I couldn't function. I packed the kids in the car and drove to Virginia to my sister-in-law's house so she could keep an eye on them while I tried to collect myself before I broke into a million pieces. I just needed a complete change of scenery. And the first thing I did was I emailed my new attorney expressing my disbelief in their decision to do this, and he responded, "I'm not surprised, and soon enough, you won't be either." And I wish I could say that they proved him wrong, but he was right. I am no longer surprised by what the men leading Hyde Park Baptist Church do. So then I reached out to Jay Cookingham. He's the pastor of Bridge Builders Community Church, which meets inside the Hyde Park Baptist Church building. My in-laws were attending his church at the time, and I'm really not sure how we wound up friends on Facebook, but he had been supportive and he was close with Marie, so I thought it might be helpful to hear his thoughts. And I can't go back and read this word for word for you because Jay has me blocked on social media now, meaning I can't access our messages. Basically, I asked him if he thought it was appropriate for the church to lie in its answer. I said that I get that lawsuits are what they are, but I didn't expect ethics to be off the table, and that I wouldn't lie to win, and I would have expected the same from the church. I told him I didn't even want to win, I just wanted resolution. And then I told him about the doctrine of unclean hands, which he Googled, asked me if that's what I meant, and then responded with a puking emoji, saying that it was wrong. After that, I reached out to Todd Petit. Todd was a board member in 2005 when my abuse was exposed, but he'd only recently left Hyde Park to move out of state, a year or two maybe, I'm not sure, before my lawsuit was filed. So he'd been supportive in the wake of Weaver's arrest and straight up offered help in the legal stuff if I needed it, which honestly was surprising to me. I thought he might have some perspective on what his position would be if he were still on the board during litigation. And I won't detail that whole conversation here, but basically, he questioned the wisdom of filing the lawsuit, but he responded with disgust when I explained the ways that the church had been responding to me over the past year. He said he was shocked. He expressed regret that they had not listened and told me that he thought my demands for apology and truth were reasonable, and that they should have heard me out. And he did not think that I was to blame. So at some point in this process, I texted Katie Galvano and I said, "It's all gone. To which she obviously responded with confusion. And I said, every ounce of respect I had left for Hyde Park Baptist Church, it's all gone. I explained what happened with their answer, and I'm going to read my journal entry from a couple days later. Katie called me this morning, sounding frantic almost. She said she brought her kids to Hyde Park Baptist Church for soccer this morning and decided to approach Murray. She told him she knows he can't answer questions, but she needed to let him know that she was disappointed with the church response to the lawsuit. He claimed to not even know the lawyer had filed an answer. And I quote, "I'm always the last to know," end quote. He said he is meeting with the attorney in 2 weeks. Katie showed him the part of our texts about the doctrine of unclean hands. Murray claimed to not know what that was and was upset. Quote, "That is not what we think at all, and that's not how we pray for her," end quote. He said he has wanted to reach out to me, but everyone is telling him not to. Powerlessness. He also made a point to tell her all the things they're doing, like installing cameras and windows. There are several things about this that my intuition is telling me are off. 1, the answer says that this is based on conversations with the defendant. Maybe he did file without giving them notice, but I don't know. 2, Murray's sermons don't reflect this. They are 100% in defense of the church, claiming Satan is attacking. How he can possibly think that that's coming across as caring for me in any way is inconceivable. 3, Murray had the opportunity to speak to me and didn't take it. Sent me away with, "Well, I can't tell you anything." Yet he's telling people he told me that whatever I needed, they would do. That is a lie. 4, quoting Murray's sermon, "We don't make statements to man," end quote. He is adamant about the church not answering to the state and that the church is right. He is digging in his heels arrogantly from the pulpit. 5, Murray told the newspaper in March, and let me clarify, I don't know for certain that this was Murray. That is an assumption. "We don't want to have anything to do with this." He has consistently tried to hide, like that will protect the church and its reputation. Nothing about the way that they've acted says truth at whatever cost. None of it. He might feel for me, but actions are what count. Till I see actions, I'm not buying it. And here are a couple of other thoughts. 1, this is still from my journal entry. Sorry, it's hard to tell when I stop reading. I'm still reading. 1, this might be the first time someone has gone to bat for me, besides my immediate family members. I'm letting that sink in. Katie went straight to the top and stuck her neck out for me. 2, Murray told her to tell me he doesn't agree, and if there are people who think badly of me and his church, he'd like to see them move on. 3, Murray says he never got the book I sent, and yet I have a picture of it on his front porch. 4, Katie told him all I ever wanted was for someone to talk to me. If they'd done that, instead of keeping me at arm's length, we wouldn't be here. I'm glad he's received that message. And 5, Katie also told him that I'd hoped Hyde Park Baptist Church would be a beacon for how to do this right, but all respect I had for them died with their response. I'm remaining hopeful that there can be resolution, but I'm not setting my heart on it. I asked someone I won't name why justice is wrong when it involves calling a church to account. I was upset because I was angry at the way people excuse the church, but scrutinize my every action. The church can protect its money with lies, But how dare I ask for the truth? I texted her the next day to tell her more of what's really bothering me. It's something deeper than the actions. It's the source of the actions. The painful realities that the actions prove. Things I wanted them to prove weren't true. There's so much I'm subconsciously trying to hold on to that each step of this process proves I can't. And that's causing friction. What I meant was, I think I'm begging them to show me that church can do right in self-abandon. But they aren't. I'm hoping they will rescue church for me, and they won't. I want to believe church can be a good thing, but I need to let that hope die. God must have more than this. God is better than what we've made church into. Like I told Weaver last year, church is a show. So that's the end of my journal entry. There was never any attempt to fix the answer. They never filed an amended answer. Nothing. So, I don't know. I'm going to read you a poem I wrote in November-ish while I was trying to process the answer, because I was really struggling to comprehend that men who were instrumental in my own fledgling faith as a child would act like this. And peeling them away from my belief system without wrecking the whole thing was harder than you might expect. Anyway, the poem is called Pillars of the Church. The faith of a child born with ease yet so weak, resting in the integrity of the company she keep. I trust you to show me the way. I trust you. What does the Father say? I'll live it, I'll walk it, with you as my guide, but I look up from the struggle, and you're nowhere to find. Are you idols or pillars? Have I donned you a crown? If I let you men crumble, will it all fall down? You're splitting and cracking when I need you to heal. Why won't you save it? Prove with action what's real. I pushed and I shoved, desperately searching for truth. Was I wrong all along? Were you the gods of my youth? So anyway, the answer came with a bunch of other demands, and we got to work on some of that, but things moved pretty slowly until the criminal case was finished, and it was shortly after the answer to the complaint that the solicitor reached out to me to discuss the next steps for the prosecution. So I'm going to cover that in the next episode. And if you made it this far, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
If your community is dedicated to fostering a safe and supportive environment, connect with Grace, Godly Response to Abuse in the Christian Environment, at netgrace.org. Grace's mission is to empower Christian communities to recognize, prevent, and respond to abuse effectively. They provide vital resources and training to help churches understand the complexities of abuse and adopt effective prevention policy and trauma-informed responses.